Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie, and in today's video we are building in Primate Isles once again. We are building for the Galapagos giant tortoise. Now this is our first animal in the zoo that isn't going to be a primate. I thought it would be worth breaking it up a little bit with some non-primate videos because it's going to get a little bit boring, right? For you guys as viewers, you don't want to see me building pretty similar things each time. So today we are going to be building for the Galapagos tortoise. If you've been following the channel for a little while, you might know of Floki. He is the namesake of our foundation. Our franchise is called the Floki Foundation, and that is named after my pet tortoise. So it feels only right to be bringing in the other species of tortoise that we have in the game into this zoo, as we have the Alder tortoise at the Floki Wildlife Park. What you can see me doing at the moment is using some of the new world set pieces, the nice light coloured planks, and I'm sketching out this building shape. This video is going to be quite a fun little challenge for me because this is the first time that I'm trying to recreate a habitat, and this is based on the London Zoo enclosure for the Galapagos tortoise. I went there very recently and I have a small tour video on the channel. If you'd like to see that, I will pop a card up at the top of the screen right now. So yeah, I am building the tortoise house based on my trip to London Zoo because I really liked the layout. It's something that you can walk into. It's very humid. It's very hot and humid in there. But the animals seem to really enjoy it because obviously they come from this tropical climate. They really like it being a bit more stuffy than us humans can handle. So what I'm doing at the moment is just building the basic structure for it, and I'm starting to try my best to get the doors just right. It's a curved building, so we're having to adjust the lengths of doors and stuff. What I'm doing is leaving the very front more open because we're going to make our own kind of glass doors that will go there, and then the larger archway kind of area that is just set back slightly, we're going to use the PVC strips there because they are always in the doorways of habitats where you're coming in from the outside. Just in case an animal is going to try and escape, they've got that kind of buffer zone. The PVC really helps with that. I'm going to start laying down a path inside as well because we obviously want our guests to be able to walk inside of here. And when placing this, it was important to make sure that I had the path joining toggled off, because otherwise it would just snap straight to the big roundabout, which is not what I wanted. So yeah, the pathing as always is a little bit finicky, but I did get there in the end. As for what pathing material I used, it didn't really matter because it was going to be underneath some floor tiles that I wanted to place above it, because I wanted this rectangular or square tile kind of looking thing because that's what they've got at London Zoo, and I wanted to replicate that as close as possible. But there are no paths like that in game, or at least not with the current DLCs we have available on console. So what I did instead was lay down a path that I don't overly care about. I'm going to change it to a dirt path later to be even more inconspicuous. And then you can take whatever floor tiles or roof tiles, whatever, that you want and sink it so much into the ground that it's just millimeters above the surface, so that when the guests come to this area, they'll be walking on the path that's underneath it, but they will appear to be walking on the tiles that you've laid down instead. You can see it did take me quite a while to get these in the exact position that I wanted. It was a little bit finicky, but we do get there in the end. And then it's time to move indoors, where I do a very, very similar thing, and that is to cover up the path that we've laid down inside. But this time I'm going to be using the sandstone finish to make it seem like, I don't know, just some barren sandy surface, because that's the kind of thing that they have in the Habitat House at London Zoo. So yeah. And for laying down this particular part of path covering, I had to make sure that I wasn't always on the grid. To do that on console, you push in on the right analog stick and then you come out of that group, meaning that you can reposition it a bit more accurately and like kind of to your taste a lot better than you would otherwise. And that allows me to create a bit more of an interesting shape rather than just one long rectangle. And with the path in place, I can then start to put in our barriers to really help define the shape of this habitat. And they are just glass barriers at the front that I'm then going to mask the, what do you call them, the supporting beams or whatever. I'm going to mask those with some wooden planks and stuff, because again, that is what it's like at London Zoo, and I want to replicate that as close as possible. So I went for some of the African ones that have the white painted stripes on them. I quite like this look. And although it's not exactly replicating what it is in the source photos that I have, I quite like this look. I do this on each of the posts and then get some longer pieces to join along the top of the glass barriers and make sure that we have a really nice finish to this glass barrier, because they can look a little bit plain, glass barriers, just by themselves. So dressing them up a little bit like this really helps. If you are still watching this video and you are enjoying it so far, I would just like to ask, if you are not already, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. We are getting close to 1,000 now. We are almost at 700. We are racing ahead to my goal of 1,000. And I'll be very grateful for anybody that joins our little crazy party here and subscribes to the channel. That would be amazing. And whilst you're down there looking at the subscribe button, maybe leave a comment on this video, because there are going to be all of the primates that are currently in game for console edition. They're going to be in this zoo, but we need other animals to break it up a little bit, to draw in crowds and to make the series just a little less repetitive for you guys, and honestly for me, because the building's going to get a little bit boring if it's the same each time. So what other animals would you like to see in this zoo? I'm thinking capybaras, because I bought a pair of those at the very beginning of Floki Wildlife Park and never used them. So they're probably going to go in here, but what else? What other little animals do we want to see scattered throughout this zoo to break up all the primates? And for anybody that is interested in some of the little details, I actually spent around 3 hours total, I think, building this habitat house. So just to give you a rough idea of how long it took, that is how long it took. Let me know if you're interested in using this in your own zoos on console, because I can always add it to the workshop, so let me know if you'd like that. Next up, it was back to having an utter nightmare with pathing. It was just not doing what I wanted at all, trying to join up this habitat gate to the paths that I'd already put in underground. Well, not underground, but under these building pieces. It just was not working as fluidly as I wanted it to. It was a bit of a nightmare. I had to delete loads of stuff and redo it, but I did end up getting it working in the end. After that, I went ahead and started to place some education boards, one by either entrance, and then there is this large wide area in the middle of the two doors. Now, the actual habitat house at London Zoo is a bit wider than this. I have made it a little bit stumpy, I guess, and there's actually room for two large windows there with information boards and stuff in the centre. But my building isn't long enough for that, so we're just going to decorate it how we want. There were cameras plotted around this habitat house, and the feed was being displayed on a screen at London Zoo, but unfortunately we can't do that yet on console. I don't know if there are plans to, but my two biggest complaints about the console edition of this game is that the burrows, you can't get the feed from them onto screens, which I know for a fact you can on PC, and I think you probably can with the webcams as well, but I'm not sure. And also, we can't insert any custom designs for screens. I would have loved to have come up with some custom signage for this tortoise habitat, but unfortunately I couldn't. I did test it out just a little bit to see what other kind of things were available in game, because I know they have the Planet Zoo screen, which I think is kind of cool, just a bit of marketing, I guess. So I considered using that, but there weren't 4 variants. I didn't really want to be having the food shops and stuff presented here, so I didn't bother. What I ended up doing was getting some of the conservation boards and sinking them into the wall slightly and lining them up either side of this earth sign that I put smack bang in the middle of this wall, which I quite like, by the way. I really quite like this earth sign. But yeah, I just end up popping a couple of the conservation boards either side of this world sign, because then you can have a bit of variety in your education and just a bit of variety in what you're looking at, to be fair. It's all quite similar otherwise. So having these different information signs really does help spice things up. But as I say, I really would like to be able to add some smaller custom signs if possible. If anyone at Frontier ever discovers my channel, which is incredibly unlikely, please could you carry this over to the team, please? After that, it was actually time to start dealing with where our tortoises are going to be living. Now, at London Zoo, there are a couple kind of bathing spots. They are shallow pools that the animals can lie in. They get very muddy because the animals are lying in them all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very gently push a couple craters either end of the habitat into the ground, and I really do want them to be quite shallow. After that, I'm going to go over to the aquatic rocks and pick out the steps. I'm then going to try and line the edges of these small shallow pools using the aquatic rock steps, and I actually really like how it turns out. I wasn't 100% sure how it's going to work, but I am really quite happy with the outcome, and I would definitely suggest that you do this if you like the idea of having slightly man-made looking pools and drinking water and stuff. If you like the idea of having quite man-made concrete looking ponds, then I would definitely suggest doing this, because I've tried to make it completely out of concrete before using different building pieces, and this was so much easier, and I think I kind of prefer this stepped look to it. So yeah, I would definitely suggest that anybody wanting to do this kind of thing uses the aquatic steps, at least as a test. The glass roof that I end up using for this building is really quite simple, nothing fancy. It's just some glass roof pieces from the classic pack, I think, just uniformly covering the whole roof. You may notice that I've left the back wall open, and that is because initially I was considering building an outside area as well, but by the end of it I decided I wanted to try and make this as close to the actual habitat as I possibly could, and it also allowed me freedom for looking inside of this building. One of the biggest issues that you can come across when you're building internal habitats is that once you add a roof, things get very claustrophobic and difficult to move about. It can be quite difficult to build. So yeah, leaving it open a little bit was kind of a saving grace. What we're going to be doing now is using some metal beams and stuff to create a couple hanging structures that are going to connect to the ceiling that will have a couple basking lights hanging from them. Nothing fancy, it literally is just an eye shape made out of the eye-shaped beams, and then a couple of the, I don't know what they're called, little hook kind of things that I can then attach to the ceiling. And once I've got the upper part of this thing built, I can just flip over the whole structure and add some lamps to the underside of it. I believe I end up using a couple of the lamps from the East Asia theme, as I really quite like the, I don't know how to describe it, it's kind of like a large metal dish with a light bulb inside of it. I just really like that shape for basking lamps in particular. I do have to sink it quite far into the beams because the arm that this thing is attached to poked out the top a little bit, but it's not an issue. Once I had that shape how I wanted it, it was just a matter of taking it indoors, flipping it over and raising it up to attach it to the roof. For a little bit of decoration and the slightest hint at realism, I decided to place a couple vents on the upward parts of the wall, where you want all the steam and stuff that's being created from such a humid environment to leak out, because you don't want it to build up too much. As it's a glass roof, you're going to have damp problems and stuff, so ventilation is kind of important in this area. I'm also going to create a wooden fence that will run around the perimeter of the habitat to stop the animals charging at the walls too much and all that. Tortoises are quite destructive. I know, my little guy is kind of like that. So what I'm doing is using some African branches just to create a really simple fence, and then use some of the really bendy and windy pieces to tie them together. Have those be the horizontal beams. I'm going to use about 3 of them just so it looks nice and not organic, but as if it's been made from natural pieces. It's kind of a crude structure, I guess. Something that can be cheaply made by our employees. And then I'm going to copy and paste this around the perimeter of the habitat. It was around this point in the build that I started to actually kind of feel proud of what I've done, because it really is starting to resemble the Habitat house in London Zoo. So it's time to add a few more details and stuff to really tie it all together. And one of those is focusing on the doorways. Not only do I need to add a roof, but I need to build some doors. It's not just going to be an archway, but we're going to build some glass doors. To do that, I'm going to use 2 of the pre-assembled doors just from the door tab. And I'm going to put those in the middle, and then either side of that I will have a large pane of glass, a little bit above it as well. And then to add just a tiny bit more detail, I'm going to use some marquee beams, the metal beams, and I'm going to break up the glass panels a little bit, add a little bit of a lining to the structure, I guess. And later on we can open up these doors a little bit, because whilst we're building them closed so that everything is symmetrical, the guests can't walk through a closed door. Well, they can in the game, but you know what I mean. It's going to look better if the glass doors are slightly open. The next thing to build was a challenge that I was really looking forward to. To begin with, I'm just adding these wooden structures to the front to create a kind of overhanging area that you could have ivy and stuff growing off of, which I didn't do. I've only just thought of it right now, but it is that kind of structure where you would have hanging plants growing from it and stuff. But it also provides a tiny bit of shelter when you're walking into the habitat. But the thing that I was looking forward to building was the sign. They have a gorgeous sign at the top of the habitat in London Zoo, which resembles a tortoise shell because it has this lovely hexagonal pattern on it. But the enclosure is titled Giants of the Galapagos. So I'm going to use some basic font pieces to get Giants and Galapagos on there. But obviously, well, no, not obviously, but I do need of the to be in a smaller font than what I'm currently using. And the font pieces that I am currently using are the smallest available to me at the moment. So I need to figure out how to get smaller. Now, a way around this is to use a sign and type out the message that you want on that sign. And then with a lot of accuracy, a bit of patience and stuff, you can actually sync the sign to a point where the surface of it, the metal background, the actual item itself is hidden within the piece that we've already got on the floor. And all that shows is the text on top of the sign. You can, if you can get it just right, you will have just the text poking through onto the surface of your your custom sign that you're making. It is finicky, it is difficult to do, but it really does help to get smaller texts and stuff, and even mix up fonts, because you have different fonts available to you when you're making your signs. So if you want to make custom signage and want different sized text and different fonts and stuff, I would definitely suggest that you try to do this on your own builds. And once I was happy with the signs, it was just a matter of getting them into position. All you need to do is flip them up onto the right axes and move them up into position. And I am really happy with how these look. Now, London Zoo do actually have a swirly kind of pattern underneath them, and I did try to create something vaguely similar using art pieces, but it just didn't look right. So this is what we're sticking with, and either way, I am really happy with it. Back inside the habitat, I decided to play about with some of the decals, and I'm using some grunge ones, just putting them on areas that I think the tortoises might actually get to, like the tiny bit of wall where the custom fence doesn't quite cover it. And we're also going to have some around some stress points, like some of the beams and stuff, and by the habitat gate, because obviously our keeper's going to be coming back and forth from there, and they're not going to be sweeping up every single time, so they might tread some mud into the floor a little bit. I did have a brief look to see if there are any tortoise themed signs. Unfortunately there aren't, but nonetheless we can still make this place look even better. We're going to use a few different types of materials. Now we're going to use the wooden beams that we used to kind of mask the glass barrier earlier, those African pillars. We're going to use a couple of those to make fence posts, and then we're going to use the 2 meter lengths of rope to bridge between them. Once you have one post in place and one piece of rope in place, you can copy and paste the 2 items along, making sure that they are evenly spaced it's a really easy way of making quite an effective little border to a path like this. Then it was finally time to get our animals into their habitat, make sure their terrain distribution needs were met, and start to place a bunch of foliage. Now, I did want to use quite a few small trees because it's actually kind of packed in London Zoo. There are quite a few trees in their habitat, but it's franchise mode. I really need to try and stick to the habitat requirements as close as I can to make sure that our animals' welfare is as high as possible. So we are a little bit more restrictive with the plant life in this habitat, but I think it still ends up looking quite nice. And then when we're done inside, we move outside to surround this area with some indigenous plant life. And what I mean by that is this zoo is in Africa, in the tropical biome, so we're using plants from those filters, make sure it kind of blends into the surrounding area. And with that, this habitat house is done. So you guys can enjoy the rest of this time lapse, and then there'll be some cinematics at the end. Thank you so much for having watched this video. I am really quite proud of this habitat. I am very happy with how it turned out. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.